Hello, today's day 8. China resists the British. We moved from Europe and England and France to India, and now we're moving to China. The Qing dynasty in China is its own empire with its own emperor, and it is going to resist the British Empire with its Empress of India, Queen Victoria. Question number 1. Why did China reject trade with Britain? 18th and 19th century China was a largely prosperous place. It was prosperous and wealthy in the 17th and 18th centuries, largely due to new strains of rice that were fast growing and nutritious, and many new crops from the Americas, such as yams and potatoes, peppers, etc. The Chinese were prosperous and had an ancient culture. They looked down on foreigners as strange and different. And when the English first arrived, the Chinese emperor rejected trade with the English because all of the goods that the British were trying to trade were seen as strange or just inferior. Things like British musical instruments or British pottery were less good than the Chinese options. Chinese textiles, silk, etc., was much nicer than British textiles. China was rich. They had plenty of food to feed its people. They had mines for things like tin and silver and iron. They had a developed textile industry for cloth and luxury cloths and goods. They had luxuries like porcelain, so famous that we even just in English use the word China to describe the high quality porcelain of China in the 18th century. They did a lot of trade in these luxury goods. You have shopping, you have stores, you have retail, you have trade inside of China on boats on the rivers, and you have trade between China and its neighboring countries. But Britain really didn't have anything that China wanted or needed. So why did Britain need something to sell to China? And the answer is that China had things Britain wanted, and Britain didn't have anything China wanted. The British merchants sailed to China and tried to buy lots of things, among which the most famous is tea. British merchants went to China, bought lots of different luxury goods, including tea, again and again and again, but had nothing that they could in exchange sell to the Chinese merchants. Chinese merchants, quite savvily, only took cash payments. So the British found themselves in the position of paying tons of silver coins, cash, to the Chinese in exchange for Chinese goods, and they didn't have anything to sell back. The balance of trade was definitely in China's favor. So the British merchants found a different way to make money off of China: the opium illegal drug trade. Opium is a super addictive narcotic, and the British processed it, grew it, and exported it from their colony in India. Then they took the bundles of opium and smuggled it into China illegally, getting money in silver in exchange, and then they could use that money in silver to purchase Chinese goods, which they could then bring back to England to sell. Continuing that same question, this was called the Silver Triangle, where you had British people going to India, getting opium, bringing it to China, selling the opium, getting money, buying tea, going back to Britain, selling that, and going around in the triangle. Another point to be made about this silver triangle is the law of supply and demand. As the amount of opium going into China increased, the price that the British were able to get for that opium decreased, which means that they had to increase the supply of opium in order to make the same amount of money. Of course, as more and more opium goes into China, the price of the opium in China goes down, which then enables more people to purchase it and more people to become addicted. So the British needed to sell illegal drugs to China because China didn't want to buy anything else from the British. The British didn't have any other products Chinese people wanted, but illegal drugs that were addictive was the British key to getting silver out of China. So why did opium hurt the Chinese people so much? Well, opium is an incredibly addictive drug. In the 1700s, in the 18th century, it's a social drug. It's used by the wealthy in combination with tea in a social setting. Um, a luxurious, wealthy person activity taken in moderation didn't hurt people that much. Opium, though, as the British increased the supply of opium into China, it became cheaper. And it meant that more and more people could afford to purchase it. More people could afford to use it more often. Also, at the same time, the British were making it more pure, the drug was getting stronger, and it was getting more addictive. This led to large numbers of people becoming addicted to the drug and using it more regularly. While opium smoking gives the user a short-term feeling of euphoria, it in the long term leads to the inability of that person to go to work, to go to school, to really do anything other than continue to use the drug. The withdrawal symptoms are pretty severe. Things like irritability, anxiety, hallucinations, paranoia, mood swings, etc. The withdrawal is serious enough that it can lead people to crime, to stealing, to robbing, to get money or to get the drug itself. It can lead to long periods of lethargy, apathy, exhaustion, where the person has no energy to do any work. It also can lead, though, in the withdrawal symptoms to a feeling of restlessness, insomnia, constipation, vomiting, itching, comas, and even death. As opium addiction spread across China, it led to increases in homelessness, joblessness, divorce, domestic abuse, eventually brain damage, organ failure, and overdoses that led to death. The cycle of addiction and drug abuse spread throughout China and spread multi-generationally. You can see on this graph as the British sales of opium increased almost exponentially over time, you can imagine that the damage done to the Chinese population would be roughly equivalent. Two last things. In the middle here, you have a painting of some Chinese officials, police, destroying boxes of opium by breaking them open and dumping them in the river to prevent people from smoking it. Yes, it would poison the river a little bit, but the idea was that the government was going out of its way to make the drug unusable by humans. And the picture on the left is just the opium poppy. That's the flower that the drug comes from. When the petals come off and the flower dies, this little pod has some sap inside that can be refined into the drug. No, opium poppies don't grow in California. This leads us to our last question. Why did the Qing Emperor write to Queen Victoria? So the Emperor of China was pretty upset about all of this. Opium was already illegal in China. Opium was also illegal in Britain. So the Emperor of China wrote a letter, and this is part of it, to the Queen of England. In it, he said, "By what right do they, the British merchants, use the poisonous drug to injure the Chinese people? I have heard that the smoking of opium is very strictly forbidden by your country. That is because the harm caused by opium is clearly understood. Since it is not permitted to do harm to your own country, then even less should you let it be passed on to the harm of other countries." The Emperor of China is effectively telling the Queen of England, why are you letting your people poison my country? The poisonous drug of opium you are letting your merchants sell to my country, even though you don't allow them to sell it in your own country. Clearly you know it's wrong, clearly you know it's addictive, and you're letting it happen anyways. That leads us to the end here today. Submit your summaries, and the reading assignment that corresponds to this is also called China Resists British Influence.